All right, so there is something pretty huge brewing down in Mississippi. It's this whole legal and political showdown that touches on everything from states' rights to the power of your actual vote. And the craziest part, it all comes down to a single massive decision that's about to drop from the U.S. Supreme Court.
And this quote from Governor Tate Reeves, man, it really gets to the heart of it. He's basically saying the whole rule book for drawing voting maps could get tossed out and rewritten. So you got to ask, right? What are these new rules going to be? And why is everything just paused?
Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with the governor's big waiting game. Then we'll get into the Supreme Court case that's literally changing all the rules. From there, we'll dive into the battle over the map itself, see how that connects right back to Mississippi's own local fight, and wrap it all up by looking at what this means for the midterm elections.
All right, let's kick things off with what's happening on the ground in Mississippi. The whole story starts with this big announcement from the governor. See, he's got a plan, but it's a plan that's completely on hold, waiting for a signal from Washington, D.C.
So here's the deal. Governor Reeves says he's going to call a special legislative session. The only thing on the agenda? Redrawing the state's voting district lines. Simple enough, right? But here's the catch. He hasn't set a date. He's specifically waiting for 21 days after the Supreme Court makes a key ruling. His argument is that the legislature has the first crack at drawing these maps, constitutionally speaking, but they can't possibly do that until they know what the new rules of the game are.
And that leads us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Why is an entire state's political process waiting on 9 justices in D.C.? Well, because this isn't just some random case. We're talking about a decision that could totally transform how voting maps are drawn everywhere, from coast to coast.
So let's put a name on this thing. The case that has everyone holding their breath is called Louisiana versus Callais. You can bet Governor Reeves has that name circled on his calendar, and honestly, so do a lot of other people involved in elections all over the country. So what's the story with this Callais case? It all boils down to a challenge against Louisiana's brand new congressional map. You see, that map was specifically drawn to create a second district with a majority of black voters. And the lawsuit's central claim is that making race the #1 factor in drawing that district line, well, that's just not constitutional.
And that right there, that's the real heart of the conflict in this case. It basically forces the Supreme Court to wrestle with a massive question. What is the proper role of race when you're trying to guarantee fair representation for everyone?
Okay, and this is where things get tricky. You've got two really powerful legal ideas just crashing right into each other. On one hand, is creating a district to empower a minority group a necessary protection? Or, on the other hand, is it actually an unconstitutional type of gerrymandering? It's a huge dilemma.
So let's break down the two sides of this fight. You have the challengers, and they're arguing that if you draw a district with race as the main driver, that is, by its very nature, an illegal racial gerrymander. But then you had the defense. They're saying, whoa, not so fast. They argue this district isn't just legal, it's actually required by the Voting Rights Act.
And yeah, that Voting Rights Act, it's the absolute key to this whole puzzle. It's the landmark federal law that's all about stopping discrimination in voting. One of its most powerful provisions says that states are barred from drawing maps that water down the voting power of minorities. You know, like cracking a community into a bunch of different districts so their vote doesn't count as much. So the Supreme Court is stuck trying to figure out where's the line between protecting against that and illegally using race to draw the maps in the first place.
Okay, so let's bring it all back home to Mississippi now. Because this massive national legal battle, it has a direct twin, a local fight happening right there, which is precisely why Governor Reeves is watching this so closely. You see, Mississippi is facing its very own lawsuit over its state Supreme Court districts. Groups like the ACLU and the Southern Poverty Law Center are arguing that the current map unfairly weakens the voting strength of black voters, a direct violation of the Voting Rights Act. And here's the kicker. The federal appeals court basically hit the pause button on Mississippi's case, saying, nope, we're not moving forward until we see what the Supreme Court decides in Callais. So it's basically a series of dominoes waiting to fall. First, the U.S. Supreme Court makes its ruling in the Louisiana case. That gives the green light for the federal court to hit play again on the Mississippi case. Then, and only then, does Governor Reeves call that special session. And finally, the state legislature gets the new rules and can actually start redrawing the maps. It's a whole chain reaction.
So why should you care about all this legal back and forth? Well, because this isn't just some abstract legal debate or a scheduling issue for one state. This decision is going to have huge, real-world impacts on elections that are just around the corner. I mean, listen to Governor Reeves himself. He said this decision could forever change the way we draw electoral maps. And honestly, that's not hyperbole. Whatever precedent gets set here is going to send shockwaves across the entire country.
Let's be really clear about what's at stake on a national level. For one, critics are worried that this ruling could seriously weaken protections for minority voters that have been in place for decades. It's for sure going to set a new precedent for all the redistricting battles that are always popping up nationwide. And, yeah, with midterm elections coming up fast, any changes to these maps could absolutely tip the balance of political power.
And don't think this is something happening years from now. We're expecting the Supreme Court to issue its decision by this summer. That means this whole chain reaction could kick off just a few short months before everyone goes to vote.
So all of this leaves us with one last massive question. Because no matter which way the court rules, a new standard is going to be set. The real unknown, the thing everyone is waiting to see, is this. How will these new rules of the game shape our maps, our representation, and really the future of elections in America?